I'm going to introduce Radha. We're so excited to have Radha Muthiah here, who is the president and CEO. She serves as the chief executive officer of the Capital Area Food Bank. She leads a team that distributes over 45 million meals directly and through a network of over 400 partners in DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Under COVID and the resulting economic fallout, they're facing unprecedented challenges and seeing the number of people that are food insecure rise rapidly, which Radha is going to speak to us about today. Radha is also focused on many new and innovative partnerships to address both the relief of hunger and also ways to improve health, education, and more inclusive economic growth in the region. Prior to her role, Radha was CEO of the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves and worked with CARE International on eradicating poverty through the empowerment of women and girls. Radha attended Tufts undergrad, holds a master's in economics and an MBA from Stanford. The Social Justice Committee at Holy Trinity this year pivoted once the coronavirus and the resulting economic fallout occurred, and donated over $40,000 to the Capital Area Food Bank to help support their invaluable work on food insecurity. We're so happy to have her here today and can't wait to hear her speak. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great, Sue, thank you so much for that kind introduction and also for just, your friendship over the years. And it's just wonderful that to be able to circle back in this manner. And thank you all. I know many of you, both contributed financially to the over $40,000 that Holy Trinity provided to the food bank to be able to meet the needs of the food insecure. So thank you so much for that. But I know many of you also volunteer, and thank you as well for that, because both, we've counted on both over the years. Those are both particularly valuable resources for us during this time. And thank you for your time to be able to share a little bit of what the food bank has been doing over what we call COVID phase 1, the last 6 months, and then I'll share some of our plans over what we're calling COVID phase 2, which really takes us through the fall and winter of this year. So I'll plan on just giving you some background and speaking for about 20 minutes or so, and but I would love to leave a time for a conversation and for you to be able to ask some questions and for us to have a discussion. So thank you again for the opportunity. In terms of the food bank, I know many of you are familiar, but let me just set the stage so that everyone knows a little bit about who we are and how we work. So we've been in the greater Washington area since 1980. We opened our doors on Martin Luther King's birthday in January of 1980 to be able to address the needs of those who were finding it difficult to make ends meet and putting food on the table. At that time, also coincided with the federal government making some pretty drastic reduction to food stamps, which is one of the primary federal programs to support those who are in need of additional food to meet their nutritional needs. So those were the premises, sort of a social justice start, given so many of our clients in the area have faced systemic barriers for many decades, and some would say centuries, before then, but also to address a shortfall in federal government funding. So fast forward 40 years, we thought we'd start 2020 by kind of commemorating the 40 years that we've been servicing the region and being able to celebrate what we've managed to do together as a community, because over the last few years, we've actually made some good reductions in the number of individuals who are hungry and food insecure. We've actually seen, prior to COVID, about a 6 or 7 year trend of reductions in those who are in need. And it always takes a community, and this community has worked together with us and other nonprofits to be able to help support those who are a little bit less fortunate. Unfortunately, when COVID hit, all of that changed. So we typically, I would say, operate with a network of about 450 different smaller partner organizations in the community. So many of you would have heard of So Others Might Eat, Martha's Table, DC Central Kitchen, Bread for the City, Manna, Food for Others. I could go on. These are all partners included within our 450 partner network. So we provide food to them and they provide food to the end clients, if you will, those who are in need. So we function a little bit like an aggregator or a wholesaler, and they function as our distributing partners in different communities. So we had about 450 of those partners prior to COVID. And also prior to COVID, just to throw out a few numbers at the beginning, this region had about 400,000 food insecure people. So a large number even before COVID, and a number that was actually, reducing over the last several years. So 400,000 food insecure. We provide food through our network of about 450 different partners, and on average, about 30 million, 32 million meals a year. So that was what the food bank would provide. Now, COVID arrived and so much changed. So for us, what happened right at the beginning of COVID was that our partner network basically shut down. Of those 450 partners, at the end of March, we only had 60 partners who were open. And that's because many of our partners are run by volunteers, many of whom are senior, and they were uncertain, just as so many of us were, as to what COVID was, how it spread, and everyone was trying to minimize their risk. And so many of these sites shut down. And it was the exact same time that people, and you'll remember, we were all being told to have a couple weeks worth of groceries at home. And so many of us were going to the stores trying to get whatever we could get our hands on and have that in our home pantries, if you will. But these 400,000 people who we've been helping for some time, they didn't have the ability to have 2 weeks worth of groceries at home. Typically what they get from us is about 3 to 5 days worth of groceries each month. So all of a sudden they needed 2 to 3 times more from us than they would before. So we rapidly depleted our own inventory because people were asking for more food that they could keep at home. The other issue is that many of the traditional organizations that people would go to get food had shut down. So we had to set up pop-up pantries all around the region so that people would have the ability to get the food that they needed. So, as the demand was increasing from the existing 400,000 people, because they needed 2 weeks worth of groceries at home, the distribution side was shutting down. So we needed to set up all of these different avenues, if you will, to be able to get food out to people. So those were some changes that were taking place in March. The other thing I would add that changed significantly for us is where we got our food. Typically, 2/3 of our food is donated to us. So think of all of your retailers in the area, from Giant to Costco to Safeway, Whole Foods, Target. Anybody that carries food often has food that is not being sold, is getting close to the sell-by date. And we tend to get a lot of that in the form of donations. And then we turn around as quickly as possible to get that food to those who are food insecure. During March, given that all of us and the rest of the nation, was going to grocery stores, in some case hoarding, in some case just getting whatever they could, there was nothing left on the shelves for retailers to donate to us. So very quickly, within about a 10-day period in March, our donations of food from these retailers dropped by about 75%. So we see this increasing demand and what people need. And then we see at the same time this decrease in the supply of food that we were getting. So we had to quickly pivot and say, we can't count on this donated stream. We have to be purchasing a lot more food to service our region and the clients in the area. So we started purchasing hundreds of truckloads of food to be able to meet the current need in March and April, but also by that point, what we saw to be the growing need. Not just with our traditional 400,000 individuals who are food insecure, but people started to lose their jobs. People started to, be greater in need. We saw many people who would call our Hunger Lifeline saying, we've never had to get assistance for food before, but we need it now because we've lost a job, or both of us in the family have lost our jobs, and we need some extra support. This was before the stimulus package. This was before all of these things were in place. So people had to pay their rent, they had to pay their medical bills, etc. And the part of the budget that could be squeezed was how much they spent on food. And so they started to look for other sources of food. We have something called a hunger lifeline where people can call in to get information on which food pantry is closest to them. And we found that the number of calls tripled on our hunger lifeline. The phone was off the hook, people asking for help, people wanting to be directed to where to go to get food. And often, you would think sometimes these calls should just be 10 minutes. Someone gives you the address and you say, all right, if you're living in the 0002 neighborhood, this is where you go. This is the closest food pantry. You're done. But we also found that these phone calls have been taking longer and longer. Sometimes our staff who pick up the phone are spending 30 minutes, 40 minutes on the phone. And it's because people needed an outlet to share their concern, their worries, and many were also just embarrassed, honestly, that they had to call and ask for food. And so there was a lot of people would provide the context. Say, I've volunteered with you before. I've given you $10 or $20 a month. I've been a donor. I never expected to be in this situation where I would need to get support from you. So people were worried and embarrassed that they had to do that. And so these conversations took on a whole different meaning because we were an outlet for people just to be able to get things off their chest in this time of so much anxiety and concern. So over the course of the last 6 months, what's happened is that we have been, the number of food insecure has grown. So I told you before COVID, it was 400,000 food insecure individuals in our region. The number is now over 600,000 people. So just in 6 months, we have seen a 50% increase in the number of people who need some help to put food on the table. And it's probably, the numbers are always staggering, but when you see the unemployment statistics, and we track those on a weekly basis. I just looked at it this morning when a colleague who tracks it shared it, and it's ridiculously high in terms of the number of unemployment claims. And we track it down to the census tract, so we're able to know exactly where there's a higher growth in unemployment and where we might need to provide more food to our partners in those regions, or set up our own distributions in those areas. So a few things, again, that have changed. The number of people who are in need is by far the biggest. So 600,000, that reverses the last 8 to 10 years of progress that we've made in reducing food insecurity. And this has come so quickly. To just pivot our own operations to provide food first to 400,000 and then to 600,000 people within a few month period has seen its challenges from a supply chain perspective. But that, in addition to the fact that we're now purchasing 2/3 of the food that we're distributing. So again, to put it in some perspective, in a normal year, I'm not sure we'll ever return to a normal year, but in a normal year, we would have spent about $3.5 million in our budget on purchasing food. I mentioned so much of it is donated to us. So in a normal year, $3 to $3.5 million. This year, we're purchasing about $17 million worth of food. So you'll see the incredible increase for so many reasons. One, we're providing food to more people, less food donated. We have to purchase, a lot more food as well. So it's a significant difference to be able to address, which is why, everything helps. And what you have all done and the timing with which Sue reached out to me and how quickly you all worked to support our community, I can't thank you enough. It was really terrific. And it's what, thankfully so many in our community are supporting with as well. The other thing that has changed during COVID is that in the past, we would, in our food distributions, it would look like a farmer's market, because people could walk by, they could pick different things. They want, 2 eggplant and, 1 watermelon and, 2 bunches of kale. They could pick what they wanted, that fit with their own dietary patterns, etc. And we'd have recipe cards, and many folks would talk about, oh, if you don't know what this kohlrabi is, we can give you a recipe on how to cook it. You know, it was very interactive, if you will. But obviously with COVID and people trying to minimize exposure, none of that is happening. We're boxing every single thing practically that goes out of the food bank. And so whether it's shelf stable items or fresh produce, a lot of it gets put in boxes so that we can distribute it to people with sort of minimal contact, if you will. But what happens with having to put it in boxes is that it's an extra step in our process. In the past, we would just send out truckloads that had pallets of corn and, you know, cauliflower and, you know, broccoli, etc., without having to pack it in these family size boxes. But now that we're packing it in family size boxes, we need to have more and more volunteers come in to help us pack those boxes before we can distribute them. And again, this was a challenge, right, for all of us during COVID. We saw a big drop in our volunteer base. People were uncertain, you know, is it safe to be out and to do things that they would have done before? We have completely reoriented our operations. There, you know, for those of you who've been here, there's a conveyor belt room, and people in the past used to be, you know, close together, you know, as items would come on the conveyor belt and put them in boxes or bags. But now everything is 6 feet apart. We clean it in between shifts. Everyone is wearing masks and gloves, and there's a whole orientation on safety. And so with that, we managed to build up the volunteer base again. But that is one thing I do worry about, whether we will have enough volunteers as we go into this next phase of COVID, because we're so dependent on people helping us box all of the food, whether it's canned and boxed food or it's fresh produce, to be able to get that out to those in need. So that's something else that changed, that is a completely different operation. You know, we used to have volunteers come either the morning or the afternoon, Monday through Friday. Now we're 7 days a week. We have night shifts, evening shifts, morning shifts, you know, to be able to accommodate volunteers and to be able to pack the boxes that we need to. We are now packing 12 to 13,000 boxes a week, to be able to keep up with the need that's there in the community. And this is on top of our traditional partners who remain open, who are able to receive pallets of food, so big bins of food that they can then pack, you know, in their own facility to be able to get out to those in need. So that's a little bit of kind of where we've come from, you know, in COVID phase one. I'll just say that as we move forward for the next 6 months, you know, we are preparing, as I think everyone is, for some sort of resurgence in the fall and winter. So what have we done to plan for that? We for those of you who've been, you see we have a 120,000 square foot warehouse here in DC. Imagine a, you know, a large Costco, you know, that's what it looks like, if you will. But that's not enough space. So we rented another 60,000 square foot for the next year in Prince George's County, because what we've done is we have purchased in advance 500 truckloads of food for the next 10 months. And so we need a place to stockpile it, because we are worried that in the fall and winter, we will get stuck again with really stressed supply chains, and food will take longer to arrive from when we order it. So we started ordering in June and July for the winter, and just to have that stockpile so we're not caught too short in meeting the need that's out there. I do worry we won't have as much good produce. You know, our growing season in this region goes until November. We import from other states and you know, and the like in the winter months, but we strive to have this balance of good, nutritious food that we provide to our clients, and that is always a challenge, and COVID will make that more of a challenge as we go forward. And as I mentioned, volunteers, we are still very reliant on volunteers, and we've tried to make the operation as safe as possible, but it does hinge on people being able to come out and support some of our work. So I will leave it at that for now, and happy to take any questions. But thank you again for all that you have done for the food bank and our community, and happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. We do have a couple questions. What do you anticipate the next 2 years will be like in terms of need? And when do you anticipate that the need might start to improve?
Thank you for that question. We are looking forward 5 years, and we're doing some analysis similar to what we had done to determine what the current food insecure population is. And that analysis suggests that actually the worst year is next year, 2021. We still see more and greater unemployment heading our way, if you will. And so we don't see the rebound and the recovery until 22 in any meaningful way. There are a couple of reasons for this. Those who have become food insecure and have lost their jobs have been in particular sectors. So in hospitality, travel and tourism, the services industry, that's one area. And for those who are in those areas, if you will, we don't see a rapid rebound. That will take some time. There's another group of those who've become unemployed now. And it's an interesting one. We've seen higher spikes in Montgomery County and in Fairfax County than we would have expected. But this is also because there's been a lot of white collar layoffs, in these two areas, in terms of, contractors, other, white collar staff in the hospitality industry, et cetera. We see a lot of small businesses, that sort of could function for a little while and are no longer kind of making it. So there are those two categories. And we think the second category is likely to rebound a little bit faster, and the projections are towards the second half of 21. But given that most businesses are either somewhat slower or significantly slower or remote until next summer, we don't see a pickup in, the food trucks that service, the downtown areas and in many locations. So we actually, in our projections for 5 years, we see this high level of 600,000 plus food insecure definitely being maintained through 21, and then gradually being reduced after that. And honestly, while we try and model for 5 years, we have good clarity, I'd say, for the next 18 months. And then after that, it is highly dependent on so many different factors of government stimulus, and other ways to be able to improve the economy. So who knows what will happen after the 18 months, but we do see this being, this level of need being with us absolutely for the next 18 months.
So there's some questions about your partners in the grocery retail. So one is, have the donations from grocery retail resumed after the initial shock to the system? And have your partners been able to come back from service? You said you're down to 60.
Yes, no, thank you for that. Both really important questions. So we were down to 60 at the end of March. At this point, we're at about 55% of our network. So that's about 230 or so partners who are back on board. And we have a very concerted effort in the next 6 months to bring, another 60 to 80 partners on board. So we have, thankfully through the fundraising and support that we've received, we've actually allocated a good amount of money to help our partners reopen. And this is so important in terms of being able to get food, into the community and into different neighborhoods. So part of the unrestricted funds that we have raised are being set aside to help a partner. And I'll explain how that works. A partner might say, we now have to hire someone part-time, because we can't count on our volunteers to be able to open up the distribution center and to be able to have it functioning. So we've said, if you need that help and you happen to be in an area that has a high number of food insecure people, we will help you with that. So of the grant money that we've received, we will pass that on to you so that you can open your doors. Others have said, we now need to box everything. We need to get PPE. That costs money, and we've said we will help you with that. So we have a priority. We have something called a hunger heat map for those of you who are interested. That's on our website, and it's very interactive, and you're able to sort of drill down on that, down to the census tract, and you'll see some areas are in red, some are in orange, some are, in green. The red is the highest levels of food insecurity. And so for those areas, we are helping our partners, reopen in a much more, significant way, if you will, and then gradually providing less assistance to those who may be in, the lighter areas there. So that's one approach that we're taking for partners. It's very, very important. So we hope to be able to get up to, let's say 300, 320 partners in the next 6 to 9 months. To be honest with you, there's probably 100 partners who might not ever open again. And given how the landscape of food insecurity is changing, we also may not help them, so to speak, open up, because those areas may not be as as much in need as opposed to other areas. And so we will be looking at other partners who are able to help with food distribution in these newer areas of food insecurity. So that's a little bit on the partner side. In terms of retailers, yes, it has picked up. I would say we saw that 75% drop in March. It's probably, you know, at about a 65% level. So it's not improved dramatically because the retailers are also stockpiling. Everybody was impacted by, you know, the challenging and constrained supply chains in the spring. And so everyone knows how long it took to get food because meat processing plants were affected, you know, being able to import and get enough aluminum cans for your canned tuna from China, that was impacted. So now, you know, there's a better supply chain in place, but retailers are also stockpiling more than what they would put on the shelf. And so, you know, that's why it's not an immediate improvement in terms of what we're getting, you know, from retailers. So it's gotten better, but not substantially, which is why we have budgeted the amount that we have for purchased food this coming year.
This leads into a good question. How long will you be able to sustain this level of support without jeopardizing the food bank?
Jeopardizing from a financial perspective, from a
Yeah.
staff, okay, yeah, I think of it these days.
Well, the entry comment was your increasing costs sound staggering. So that was the entry into the question.
Sure, no, absolutely. They are staggering. There's no question about it. I mean, you know, normally our budget for the food bank is in the 19 to 20 million range. You know, we've got food costs, we've got infrastructure, we've got delivery, we've got, you know, trucks, we've got, you know, all of these things that comprise people, you know, that comprise our cost base. Now our budget this year, which we're updating again, is, you know, more in the 35 million range, you know, to be able to accommodate for these increases. I just have to say that I'm very thankful that we live in the community that we do, that has shown an incredible outpouring of support over this period of time. So, you know, do I think we're in a situation that we can manage for the next 6 to 12 months, given these elevated needs? Yes, I do. I'm you know, reasonably confident about that. What I worry about is, you know, when the donor fatigue sets in, which it will, you know, how long can people sort of say, all right, I'm going to continue to support? And I know, just like all of you, you know, you had different initiatives that were equally important, you know, that you were supporting, and you decided this year, given the role that food plays in all of our lives, to, you know, to aggregate those and provide more, you know, for the issue of food security. You know, and we're thankful for that, but we also know there are other needs that need to be tended to. And so in that sense, I'm more worried about, you know, next year, you know, and subsequent years when people won't be as focused on food security, but we still will have, you know, this huge number of people who are in need. So I guess that's how I would answer that. In terms of for this next year, I'm less worried given the focus, given the, you know, the issues and given the support. But past this 10-12 month period, yes, you know, because the focus will be less on food and shelter and more on so many other things as well. So that is a concern. I will say on another front, you know, the sustainability I worry every day is about our staff and our teams, because we are, you know, contrary to most organizations that have scaled back, you know, the presence and their days of engagement, we've ramped up. And, you know, yes, we've hired more people, but it puts pressure a lot on existing, you know, staff. And it's their health and safety. Our drivers go out every day. You know, our community outreach folks are out every day. You know, I'm in the office. We're all here. I mean, you know, granted, those who can work from home, we're doing that, and we're all rotating a little bit. But it's extending an operation that wasn't sort of designed, you know, to pivot this quickly and to the extent that we've had to. It's one thing when you see a 5%, 10%, 15% increase, but to see a 50% increase, you know, in a few months is a lot. So I am very conscious about just the mental state and the health and safety of our team members and volunteers as well.
We know that the numbers of food insecure families is across the DMV region. Do you have numbers for DC only and primarily regarding children in the district?
Yes, I do. And in fact, what I will point you to is on our website, there is a report. You'll see it right front and center at the top when you go onto the Capital Area Food Bank website. It's called the Hunger Report 2020. And that will give you, it's if I can say so, our team did it. It's a really fabulous report. It's not your usual thick binder, 100 pages of dense text. It's a visualization, so you go through it, you can just scroll right through on the website and you can click in different areas. It visually shows you where hunger is, the faces of hunger, the statistics, what happened during COVID, what are our plans after COVID. And I bring that up because you can zoom in specifically in DC, you can see the numbers there, you can see you're interested in Montgomery County, you can look at the numbers there. So there are lots of different ways to look at that. And for children, yes, you will see in that report as well that there is a 60% increase in food insecurity for children. So we're going, I don't remember the exact numbers, but something like 130, I shouldn't say, I've forgotten the precise numbers, but I know it's a 60% increase in food insecurity amongst children. So you will see that. You'll also see, the specific areas. You can click on, for example, you can in fact locate, where you live and click on that area. Because most of us think, gosh, hunger is concentrated in one area or another as part of our region, but there's not a single zip code that we don't serve. And and you will see the growth rates that I've been speaking about in food insecurity, in particular in Montgomery and Fairfax counties, which we wouldn't typically point to as areas of great need in our region. So you're welcome to go to that, and I think you'll see a lot of interesting data there.
Thank you. Do people have to prove need to receive food from the food bank and your partners?
Yeah, another great question. So typically for some programs, yes. So there's food that we purchase or food that is donated to us that can go to anybody. We don't ask any questions. But there is some food that comes to us from the USDA, and that is, so the government programs have very particular targets of populations who qualify. Some of them are seniors, some of them are children, some of them are working families making a certain percentage of the poverty line. So for those programs, you do have to prove that you qualify. Now, during COVID, some of these restrictions have been lifted. We've been advocating significantly to have those restricted, because there's, if you're meant to be social distancing, there's no time or ability to have a conversation and collect information from individuals. Plus, in this time frame where people are in need, we don't feel we should be asking. I mean, someone usually comes forward if they are in need. It's rare. I suppose you may have those instances, but it's rare to have someone trying to sort of game the system, especially during the COVID period where people aren't unnecessarily spending more time, in where they shouldn't be. So we feel good about the fact that we're able to provide food to those who need it without asking for too much, I'll say, information. It's just the government programs that still require some. In our area, this is very, very important. You all know, you all live in our area, and there's a higher percentage of immigrants across the whole area. Some are documented, some are undocumented. And from our perspective, anyone who resides here is welcome to come to the food bank to be able to, not come per se, but we have programs to be able to provide food to them. And I think that's also an important distinction. People think sometimes they come to the food bank, and because we're a wholesaler, nobody really comes here. Although, to be honest, we've had many more people who are unfamiliar with how all of this works and have showed up. And so we do have boxes that we've made up and we keep, so that people don't go away empty-handed. But typically we source the food and we distribute it through our partner network. And so that's where people would go to get the food.
Is the food bank open to onboarding new partners who are already working to help the community but need assistance, in particular around funding to acquire food?
Yes, we are open. So, so my suggestion on that is if you know of an organization that is interested in providing food, please share that. And I don't know what the best way is, whether that's through Ashley and to us, or because I've got sort of directors in Maryland, Virginia, and DC, and their teams would take those suggestions depending on where the nonprofit partner is. What we would do is look at, say it's a nonprofit partner A that you recommend, we'd map them onto our hunger heat map to see where they're physically located and where they could distribute. If it is in an area where we already have partners, then that will be less likely that we would bring them on as a partner. If it's an area where we are in need of a partner, then that's sort of stage one, if you will, that they've crossed. And then we will talk to them about their ability to store food, their safety standards. And even if they can't do that, we might think about, assembling the boxes that I talked about that we build here and then giving it to them so that they can distribute it. Then you don't have to worry so much about, do you have refrigeration and do you have enough storage? Because it can be more of a just in time. They can bring a truck and pick up boxes, or we can try and have it delivered. But absolutely, we are very much looking at partners. As I mentioned earlier, there may be about 100 of our partners who won't reopen or might not be in the locations where the need is greatest. So we are certainly interested in bringing on other partners at this point.
Thank you. Do you provide food to the World Central Kitchen?
We have a great partnership with Jose Andres and his team, and we've worked together in many instances. So during the federal government shutdown, which, in our region, I thought was the biggest disaster in recent history, before COVID, but we partnered with them to jointly provide. They provide meals. We provide the groceries that people can, take home and to cook their own meals. So we've come together and we've made it simpler for individuals so they don't have to go and pick up a prepared meal in one place and go to another site to pick up the groceries. So in that, we're very well coordinated on that front. And we continue. For example, we buy, we buy 55, or source 55 million pounds of food right now. And so we're able to get really good rates, even, much, much, much better rates than any of our NGO partners would be able to get, if they were to use their funds to go out and purchase. So many, in fact, purchase through us. So, it would seem like, they do pay us for the food, but it's because we get it at 1/5 of the price that they'd be able to get it if they were to go, get the food at Safeway or Giant or elsewhere. So, so similarly with World Central Kitchen, at times, not regularly, but at times when they have needed large orders of rice or something else, that we can engage in procurement for them.
Thank you. What kind of advocacy or education are you doing on the Hill, if any?
Quite a bit. So we, as a food bank, there are about 200 similar food banks around the country, and we all belong to an association called Feeding America. Some of you may have heard of Feeding America. So in that sense, each of us has our own geographies. We happen to be the food bank in the region that has Capitol Hill, within it. So we have a slightly unique role in the sense that we do advocate directly, just because the Hill is in our region. But in most instances, anything at the federal level, we would do jointly with our colleagues through Feeding America, so that it's 200 food banks, advocating for particular issues around the country. So most recently at that level, we've been advocating for an increase in SNAP, which is the food stamp program. That's so important because as much as we can do as food banks, every meal that we provide, SNAP can provide 9 meals. So that is the bigger program. That is the program that we need to sustain. That is the program that, all of you, if you, have the ability or interest in writing to your representatives or senators, that's what needs to be not only sustained, but increased. And we're asking for at least a 15% increase to SNAP. And so that's important because remember, those who might be getting $100 in food stamps, 15% increase, that $15, will go a long way in terms of a few more meals for the family. So we're advocating for that. We've been advocating for the continuation of the stimulus, whatever it is. I mean, in the beginning, we wanted to have, the maximum amount of stimulus, if you will. At this point, we're just concerned that there's nothing and people have had nothing in terms of the additional unemployment insurance that ended July 31st. So we're almost 8 weeks without that, and we are seeing the impact of the lack of that additional unemployment, insurance that's added. So we're just asking at this point for an agreement on the stimulus package, something that people can count on to help plan their lives for the next couple of months at least. So that's something else that we're advocating for. Now, at the local level, we do a lot too, because a lot of the stimulus money has gone from the federal government to the states. And so advocating, and for us, we, have the good fortune, which is often not the good fortune, of dealing with three different, Maryland, Virginia, and DC. And they all operate differently in terms of how they choose to use the federal stimulus money that came to them. So there's a lot of advocacy that we do with the data that we have that highlights why, a certain amount of money should be allocated to food-related issues, in addition to all kinds of other issues that the stimulus money is there to support. So we do that at the state level as well as at the county level, and we've worked very closely with Prince George's County, Prince William County, Fairfax County, and Montgomery County on basically just food security plans, so that we can purchase. Governments are not in the business of purchasing food. We've been, focused to make sure that the governments in each of these jurisdictions understand how much food they might need given the number of food insecure in their communities, and to sign an agreement with us so we can just go ahead and start to procure all of that. And we've got an aligned efforts for food distribution. So those are all the different ways in which we're engaging with government.
Thank you. I wanted to just share, I wrote about this in one of our social justice e-letters, that kind of an example of how it goes out to many of our partners is that we have a local group called Hope in a Home that works with families who have just come out of shelter and are food insecure, which is a new challenge that this organization has had to face. They haven't usually provided food, so they don't have a storage or a refrigerator or things like that. And so they're waiting for Elvis to approve their application at Capital Area Food Bank. But in the meantime, Father McKenna Center is one of your partners. Absolutely. And so Hope in a Home is buying some food from Father McKenna Center, which is going to be delivered in 45 minutes. And then Fantastic. Volunteers are packaging it to give to their families. So just so everyone kind of sees how we're all in this together. And, we are grateful for everything that you're doing. Another question, and we can start to wrap it up. You've been talking for a long time, I know, but we talked about the staggering numbers and the challenges of sustainability for what you do and for your staff. Where do you turn for hope day by day? How do you keep yourself and your staff moving forward?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question too. I think hope, it's there's no shortfall of hope. There are lots of challenges, but there's also kind of so many areas of optimism, for what we can do. And I think for me, and I think for many of the team members, it comes in so many different forms. One is just all of you, if I can be that direct, who may not be directly touched by it, but want to do something, in your communities, and are and have the ability to do that, and have reached out so proactively to do that. I mean, this is just incredible. It just keeps us going, knowing that, there's so many who care and who want to help. It has allowed us. I'll give you one very concrete example. In early summer, we realized we needed to start purchasing. I mentioned this 500 truckloads of food for the next year, but not spacing it out, but putting all the orders in at once, because we were worried how long it was going to take for the food to come in. Not all of our finances at that time would have suggested we could go ahead and purchase 500 trucks of food. But given the rate of growth of support that we knew had been coming in, and that we had conversations and would be coming in, we just said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and do this. And so that was faith and hope and optimism, and some good data based on, what we had seen. And that gives us hope, that our community cares, and we're just more the conduit and the vessel, to be able to get the food to those who need it. So I think that is always uplifting, that's one. I think second is just kind of how the level of cooperation and collaboration, and you just gave a great example, Ashley, about, hope, in a box, and how you're working with Father McKenna Center while you're waiting for us. I mean, the level of collaboration that has occurred during this pandemic across NGOs, the government, at the local government, et cetera, have been really strong. And so that also gives us great hope in, being able to address this. The third thing I'd say is, I sit on a few different Greater Washington mainly private sector, workshops and groups that are really looking at recovery and rebuilding of the region. And we've been advocating that organizations like ours need to be at the table, because you can't think about rebuilding and only have it affect a portion of the population. The voices, the issues, the concerns of those who've been directly impacted by COVID have to be brought forth, so that the growth that does occur is holistic, it's inclusive, and all of us are a part of it. And the fact that I've had, yes, we have to advocate a little bit, but once you make the point and the case, and the door is wide open, people get it. They want to ensure that our region recovers in a manner where we can all be proud to say we live in the greater Washington area, and it's an area that not just comprises the top 1%, but a whole diversity of individuals. And we've got a lot of different initiatives underway. There's still lots of challenges, so I don't want to be Pollyannish about this, but but the fact that there's an understanding that when we rebuild, it's got to be better, it's got to be more inclusive. That also gives us a lot of great hope. And honestly, when I see the volunteers coming in, we wondered, what would the Sunday shift look like, what would a Monday night shift look like? And we see people signing up, and so that is that's also just very comforting, in terms of we're not in this on our own. We have a certain role to play, but there are a lot of people who are our enabling environment that will allow us to do what we need to do for our community. So I think there's a lot there, and and people have said never waste a crisis. Our own teams are working so much more collaboratively together, and that's also really nice to see, just because you have to, everything that one team does impacts the other, and so you have to have a lot more collaboration there. So yeah, so there are lots of things that give me hope in terms of we will recover from this, and hopefully we will be better and stronger. And we're putting in place systems that, not that any of us wish for another pandemic or another disaster, but everything that we read and hear suggests we need to be prepared for something like this again in a few years, or decade, or whatever it is. And so part of what we're doing now is not just responding, but saying, let's actually better understand and codify how all of this works in case we need to go to this again.
Wonderful. I don't have any more questions unless anyone has one they want to add real quick, but we are grateful to be a partner with you. Thank you so much. I took down so many notes. This has been really enlightening, just to drill down on some of the numbers, and we will continue to be present here for you and volunteering. And I know we had some family members on Sunday, and we have another group this Saturday. So we'll continue to do that. And thank you. And thank you for all the good work.
Thank you so much for all of your work, Radha, really,
goodness,
and for taking your time to come speak with us at Trinity.
Not at all. I'm so grateful. This is what gives me a lot of, the connection and the ability to thank you. I was going to say in person, but as close to in person as possible here. And no, we appreciate the partnership. I'm so glad that you're already working with Elvis. He's our DC coordinator. And so, any other ideas in terms of other NGOs or volunteering or advocating, thank you for all of that. And we'll look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks everybody. We call out for next month. We have the Catholic Mobilizing Network on October 6th, if you want to learn more about what's happening with federal executions. And then on October 15th, Professor Bernie Evans is going to talk about voting from a Catholic perspective. So I hope that we will see you on those dates too.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.